My husband watched our daughter gasp for air last night because he claimed we were too broke for her medicine. But this morning, I found a secret bank account with $45,000 in it. While my children and I have been shivering in a 62-degree house and eating 19-cent instant noodles to survive, Mark has been dining on lobster and steak at 5-star restaurants. He has spent years gaslighting me into believing I was a financial burden, forcing me to beg my retired father for grocery money while he hoarded a fortune to buy a vacation home with his mother. I feel physically sick. The man I share a bed with is not a provider. He is a predator who gets high on seeing his own family suffer. He let our son cry from hunger just to teach me a lesson about a debt I paid off years ago. I am holding the bank statement in my shaking hands right now, and the rage is burning a hole through my chest. I need to take the kids and run, but part of me wants to stay and burn his perfect reputation to the ground. He thinks I am weak, but he is about to find out what a mother is capable of when her cubs are threatened. What would you do if you found out your entire life was a cruel lie? My name is Blair. I am 32 years old, a full-time housewife, and a mother to 2 beautiful children who are currently sleeping in a room that is too cold for the impending winter. We live in Westport, Connecticut, a town where the driveways are lined with manicured hedges and the air smells like old money and sea salt. To the casual observer, or perhaps to the other mothers at the pickup line who judge me by the model year of my minivan, I am living the suburban dream. I have a handsome, hardworking husband named Mark. I have a colonial-style house with white shutters and a wraparound porch. I have a life that looks perfect on a holiday card. But the truth is, a ghost haunting the empty hallways of my home. It is 4 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. I am standing in aisle 4 of the local Whole Foods, a place I should not be, staring at 2 boxes of dry pasta. My hand is trembling, not a subtle shake, but a violent tremor that rattles the cardboard box in my grip. The box in my left hand is the organic brand, the one with the hidden vegetables that the kids actually like. The box in my right hand is the generic store brand, the kind that turns into a gummy paste if you boil it for 30 seconds too long. The difference in price is exactly 50 cents. I stand there, frozen, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. 50 cents. To anyone else in this affluent zip code, 50 cents is nothing. It is the change they leave in the jar at the coffee shop. It is a rounding error. But to me, 50 cents is the difference between a peaceful evening and an interrogation. If I spend this extra 50 cents, the weekly grocery total will exceed the strict $75 limit Mark has set for a family of 4. If I go over the limit, I have to explain why. I have to present the receipt. I have to stand in the kitchen like a naughty child while he circles the items with a red pen, sighing that heavy, disappointed sigh that crushes my soul more than any shout ever could. I put the organic pasta back on the shelf. I place the generic box in my cart. I cannot risk it. This is my life. I am a woman who is terrified of 50 cents. I drive home, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. Our house appears on the horizon, looming large and impressive. Mark insisted we buy this house. He said it was necessary for his image as a senior financial consultant. Clients need to trust that he is successful. He told me, but the house is a lie. The living room, the one visible from the large bay window at the front, is furnished with a plush cream sofa and a mahogany coffee table. It is a stage set. Beyond that room, the house is sparse. We do not have a dining table in the formal dining room. We eat at the small kitchen island. The guest bedrooms are empty. We keep the heat set to 62 degrees to save on oil. I park the car and rush inside to start dinner. Mark likes dinner on the table at 6:30 sharp. At 6:15, the garage door rumbles. My stomach drops. It is a Pavlovian response. The sound of my husband coming home should bring relief, but instead, it brings a wave of nausea. Mark walks through the door. He is 32, just like me, but he carries himself with the weight of a much older man. He is wearing a charcoal suit that fits him perfectly, tailored to accentuate his broad shoulders. He looks exhausted, or at least, he performs exhaustion very well. I am home, he announces, dropping his leather briefcase on the counter with a heavy thud. Hi, honey, I say, wiping my hands on my apron. How is work? He loosens his tie, grimacing. Brutal, absolutely brutal. The market is volatile. Blair, you have no idea the pressure I am under. Everyone wants a piece of me. I spent the last 3 hours cleaning up a mess that the junior analysts made. I barely had time to breathe. I move closer to take his jacket. A dutiful ritual I perform every evening. As I hang the heavy wool fabric over my arm, I catch a scent. It is faint, masked by the crisp smell of dry cleaning and his expensive cologne, but it is there. It is the smell of aged oak and berries, expensive red wine, and beneath that, the savory, smoky linger of seared meat. My stomach growls. I have not eaten lunch because I wanted to save the leftovers for the children's school lunches tomorrow. You must be starving, I say, trying to keep my voice steady. I made pasta. Mark looks at the pot on the stove with a look of disdain. He walks to the refrigerator and pulls out a sleek, black takeout box that he had hidden in his briefcase. I grabbed something on the way, he says, not looking at me. I need protein, brain food. That carb-heavy slop makes me sluggish. He sits at the kitchen island and opens the box. Inside is a premium sushi assortment. I see thick slices of fatty tuna, glistening salmon sashimi, and a roll topped with caviar. The smell of fresh ginger and soy sauce fills the kitchen, overpowering the smell of my boiling pasta water. It must have cost at least $40, more than half of my weekly grocery budget. The kids, Leo and Sophie, run into the kitchen. They are 5 and 3 years old. Their eyes widen at the colorful feast in front of their father. Daddy, can I have a piece? Leo asks, pointing a small finger at the salmon. Mark pulls the box closer to him, creating a barrier with his arm. No, Leo, this is Daddy's dinner. Daddy worked very hard for this, but I am hungry. Leo whines. You are having pasta, Mark says, his voice dropping an octave. Be grateful for the food your mother cooked. Do you know how many children are starving in this world? I ladle the generic pasta into 3 bowls. I mix in a little butter and salt because we cannot afford the jarred sauce this week. I place the bowls in front of the kids and myself. The contrast is sickening. We are eating plain noodles that taste like wet cardboard, while 2 feet away, my husband is dipping a piece of yellowtail into soy sauce. Mark, I whisper, leaning in so the kids do not hear. Maybe just 1 piece for them? They have not had fish in weeks. Mark stops chewing. He puts his chopsticks down slowly. The silence in the kitchen becomes sudden and suffocating. He turns his head to look at me, his eyes cold and flat. Are you questioning my judgment, Blair? He asks softly. Saoyutsinhalin, 2 cancelletto, è maggiore di... No, I just... Saoyutsinhalin, ar tsinghao dayu. Do you want to talk about finances? He interrupts, his voice rising just enough to make me flinch. Do you want to bring out the ledger? Because I seem to recall that 3 years ago, you were the one who maxed out a credit card buying useless decorations for a nursery. You were the one who put this family in debt. You proved that you cannot be trusted with resources. I look down at my bowl. The shame burns my cheeks. It is the same old weapon, sharpened by daily use. Yes, I made a mistake years ago. I spent $2,000 we did not have because I was nesting and anxious. I have been paying for it every single day since. I am trying to teach them discipline. Mark continues, picking up his chopsticks again. If my brother had learned discipline, if he had learned that you do not just get what you want because you ask for it, maybe he would still be alive today. There it is. The ultimate trump card. Mark's older brother died in a car accident when they were teenagers. It was a tragedy, undoubtedly, but Mark uses his brother's death like a shield and a sword. He uses it to justify his need for control, his extreme frugality towards us, and his erratic moods. I am sorry, I whisper. You are right, I always am. He mumbles through a mouthful of rice. He finishes the sushi, leaving nothing but the plastic garnish. He does not offer a single grain of rice to Sophie, who is staring at his plate with wide, watery eyes. After he eats, he pushes the trash towards me to clean up and walks into the living room to watch the financial news on the only television we own. I stand at the sink, washing the cheap plastic bowls. My hands are submerged in warm, soapy water, but I feel cold. I look out the window into the dark backyard. I see the reflection of the kitchen behind me. I see a woman who looks tired, worn down, and small. Inner monologue screams in my head. Why do you stay? Why do you let him treat you like this? But then the other voice answers. The voice Mark has planted in my mind like a weed. Because you are useless. Because you are a financial liability. Because without him, you and the children would be on the street. He is the provider. He is the hero who saved you from your own stupidity. I dry my hands on a towel that is fraying at the edges. I tell myself that this is temporary. I tell myself that he is just stressed, that he is doing this for our future, to build a safety net so we never have to worry. I tell myself that he loves us in his own broken, complicated way. I do not know yet that the man sitting in the other room, the man who just denied his son a piece of fish while wearing a $2,000 suit, is sitting on a mountain of secrets. I do not know that the poverty we are living in is a stage play he has written solely for my benefit. All I know is that tomorrow, I need to find a way to make the remaining pasta last for 3 more days. The mailbox at the end of our driveway is a gaping mouth that I am terrified to feed. Every day at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the postal carrier arrives in his little white truck, bringing with him a fresh stack of anxieties. Today is no different. I walk down the driveway, pulling my cardigan tight around my chest against the biting autumn wind. The leaves on the massive oak trees lining our street are turning a brilliant, fiery orange, a display of nature that people travel from all over the country to see. But I cannot appreciate the foliage. I am too busy staring at the pink envelope peeking out from the bundle of junk mail. Pink means final notice. I pull the envelope out, my fingers numb from the cold. It is from the electric company. I tear it open right there in the driveway, unable to wait until I get inside. The bold black letters swim before my eyes. Past, due, disconnection, notice, Please remit $218 immediately to avoid service interruption. $218. My breath hitches. I know exactly how much is in the joint checking account debit card that Mark allows me to carry. It holds $60 intended for gas and incidental groceries. The main savings, the paycheck, the real money, is locked away in accounts I cannot access. Mark handles the big bills. He insists on it. He says it is too complicated for me, that I will just mess up the dates like I did that one time 5 years ago. So why is the electricity about to be cut off? I rush inside, the pink slip burning a hole in my hand. I dial Mark's number. It rings 4 times before he picks up. This better be important. Blair. He snaps. I am walking into a meeting. Mark, we got a notice from the electric company. I say, my voice trembling, they are going to shut off the power. It says, we owe over $200. Did you forget to pay it? There is a pause on the other end, followed by a sharp exhale of breath that sounds like steam escaping a valve. I did not forget. Blair, I am prioritizing. Cash flow is tight this month. The market took a dip, and my commission structure shifted. I have to juggle things. But the lights? Mark, the heat. It is getting cold at night. What if the kids, Sao Jinghao Ling, are Jinghao Dayu? Stop panicking, he interrupts, his voice dropping to that lethal whisper. If you were more careful with the thermostat, maybe the bill would not be so high. I checked the Nest application yesterday. The house was at 65 degrees at noon. 65. Blair, do you think we own a power plant? I stare at the thermostat on the wall. It reads 62. It always reads 62. I wear 2 pairs of socks inside just so I do not have to touch the dial. I never turned it up. I protest weakly. You must have bumped it. Or you left a window open. You are always so careless with resources. Just let me handle it. Do not pay it. I will move some funds around next week. And Blair, put a sweater on the kids. Toughen them up. He hangs up before I can say another word. The line goes dead, leaving me standing in the silent, chilly hallway. I feel a familiar weight settling in my stomach. A mix of guilt and confusion. Was it me? Did I accidentally bump the dial? I walk over to the thermostat and stare at it. Checking the history, it shows a steady line. I did not touch it, but the doubt is already there. A small, dark seed planted by his confidence. Maybe the sensor is broken. Maybe I am crazy. Later that evening, Mark comes home in a whirlwind of chaotic energy. He does not mention the electric bill. Instead, he marches into the bedroom and pulls his suitcase from the top shelf of the closet. I have to go to Boston tomorrow, he announces, throwing shirts onto the bed. 2 days, big potential client. If I land this, it could be the bonus we need to get back on track. I stand in the doorway, watching him pack. Do you need help? Yes, my charcoal suit, the lucky one. It has a stain on the lapel. Take it to the dry cleaners first thing in the morning. Tell them I need a rush order. I will pick it up on my way out of town at noon. He gestures to the suit hanging on the valet stand. It is a beautiful piece of clothing. Italian wool, soft to the touch. I nod and walk over to it. The dry cleaning bill will be at least $20 for a rush order. I do not ask where the money will come from. I know I will have to take it from the $60 in my purse, which means we will be eating rice and beans for the rest of the week. I pick up the jacket. It is heavy, substantial. As I smooth out the fabric, checking for the stain he mentioned, I perform the ritual every wife does before sending clothes to be cleaned. I check the pockets. I reach into the left interior pocket. Empty. I reach into the right side. My fingers brush against a piece of crumpled thermal paper. I pull it out. It is a receipt. Mark is in the bathroom now, brushing his teeth. The electric toothbrush hums loudly, creating a wall of sound. I look down at the slip of paper in my hand. It is from Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. The logo is printed clearly at the top. I scan down the list of items, and my world tilts slightly on its axis. 1 cowboy ribeye, $68. 1 lobster mac and cheese, $24. 1 bottle of Silver Oak Cabernet, $140. 2 creme brulee, $24. The date on the receipt is yesterday, 12:15 in the afternoon. 小玉静好令, 2 hash is greater than yesterday. Yesterday. For lunch, I ate the crusts of the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches Leo did not finish because I could not justify making a whole sandwich for myself. Yesterday, I drank tap water because we ran out of milk. Yesterday, Mark told me he ate a salad at his desk because he was too busy to leave the office. I look at the total at the bottom of the receipt. $312.50. $300. That is more than the electric bill. That is more than my food budget for the entire month. I feel a physical blow to my chest. It is not just the money. It is the cruelty of it. He ate lobster and steak while he absolutely knew that I was stressing over 50 cents for pasta. He drank wine that cost more than our weekly utility budget while threatening me about the thermostat. My hands start to shake. This time, it is not fear. It is something hot and sharp. Mark walks out of the bathroom, wiping his face with a towel. He stops when he sees me. He sees the receipt in my hand. He does not look guilty. He does not flinch. His eyes narrow slightly. Calculating? What are you doing? He asks calmly. I hold up the paper. My voice sounds strange to my own ears. Thin and high. You ate at a steakhouse yesterday? You spent $300 on lunch? Mark sighs. A long, exaggerated sound of annoyance. He walks over and snatches the receipt from my fingers. He crumbles it up and tosses it into the wastebasket as if it were nothing more than a used tissue. You are snooping now? Is that what we are doing? Mark, we have a disconnection notice on the counter. I cry out, the tears stinging my eyes. You told me we have no money. You told me I was selfish for buying the organic apples for the kids. How could you spend $300 on one meal? He steps closer to me. He looms over me, using his height to intimidate. His face is hard, devoid of any empathy. You really are simple-minded, aren't you, Blair? The insult slaps me harder than a hand. That was a business lunch, he says, enunciating every word, slowly, as if speaking to a toddler. That was an investment. I was taking out a prospective client. You have to spend money to make money. That $300 is going to turn into a $10,000 commission. Do you understand how return on investment works? Or is that too complex for someone who stays home and folds laundry all day? But, 小玉静好令, 2 hash is greater than, but there were 2 desserts. I stammer, pointing at the trash can. You said you were busy. You said you ate a salad. I lied to protect you, he shouts, making me jump. I did not want you to worry about the upfront costs of my business. I carry the burden of this family on my back. Blair, I have to play the game. I have to look successful, eat successfully, and drink successfully to put food on this table. And instead of thanking me, Instead of trusting me, you ambush me over a receipt? He shakes his head, looking at me with profound disappointment. This is exactly why I handle the finances. You see a number and you panic. You do not see the big picture. You are so short-sighted. It is embarrassing. I shrink back. The anger that had flared up inside me moments ago begins to dissolve, replaced by the familiar sludge of confusion. He sounds so sure. He sounds so logical. Is he right? Am I being petty? If that lunch brings in $10,000, then the $300 was necessary. Maybe I am just a nag. Maybe I am the ungrateful wife he says I am. But the image of the lobster mac and cheese will not leave my mind. I can almost smell the truffle oil. My stomach grumbles, empty and cramping. I am sorry, I whisper, looking at the floor. I just saw you ting hao. Ling, 2 hash is greater than I was scared about the electricity. Mark softens instantly. It is part of the cycle. Once he breaks me, he offers a crumb of kindness. He reaches out and touches my shoulder. I know, babe, I know you get anxious. That is why I'm here, to worry about the big stuff so you do not have to. Now, please, just get the suit cleaned. I need to look my best to fix the mess you think we are in. He kisses my forehead and walks away to finish packing. I stand there alone in the bedroom, clutching the gray wool jacket. It smells of him. It smells of success and lies. I want to believe him. I need to believe him, because if I do not believe him, then the alternative is too terrifying to contemplate. If he is not doing this for us, then he is just a monster who eats steak while his children are cold. And I cannot live with a monster. So I swallow the doubt. I push it down deep into the pit of my stomach. Right next to the hunger, I will take the suit to the cleaners. I will pay for it with the grocery money. And tonight, I will tell the kids that we are having a camping adventure, and that is why we are eating dinner by candlelight. Just in case the power goes out. The sound of a child struggling to breathe is a noise that bypasses the brain and strikes directly at the heart. It is a primal, terrifying sound that wakes you from the deepest sleep, injecting adrenaline straight into your veins before your eyes are even open. It was 3 o'clock in the morning on Thursday. The house was silent, wrapped in the heavy, oppressive stillness of the suburbs, except for the rasping wheeze coming from the room across the hall. I threw off the covers and ran. The floorboards were freezing against my bare feet, but I did not feel the cold. I burst into Sophie's room. My 3-year-old daughter was sitting up in her bed, her tiny chest heaving. Her face was pale, bathed in the sickly blue light of the humidifier that was chugging away in the corner. She looked at me with wide, panicked eyes, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Mommy," she gasped. Her voice was thin, tight. My chest hurts. I grabbed her, pulling her small, hot body against mine. I could feel the rattle in her lungs against my own rib cage. It was her asthma. It was back, and it was worse than it had been in months. The cold draft in the house, the one Mark refused to fix because heating oil was liquid gold, had settled into her bronchial tubes. I scrambled for the rescue inhaler on the nightstand. I shook it, my hands trembling violently. I pressed it to her lips. "Breathe, baby," I whispered. "Big breath for Mommy." I pressed the canister. 1 puff. She inhaled, coughing. I waited a minute. She was still wheezing. I gave her a second puff. We sat there in the dark, rocking back and forth. 10 minutes passed. The wheezing did not stop. If anything, it grew higher in pitch. a whistling sound that signaled her airways were closing up. I knew, with a sinking dread that felt like a stone in my gut, that the inhaler was not enough. She needed the nebulizer. She needed the steroid solution, and the bottle in the medicine cabinet was empty. I had used the last drops 2 weeks ago and had been praying, begging the universe that she would not get sick again until next month's budget cycle. "We have to go to the pharmacy," I told her, wrapping her in her thickest blanket. The 24-hour pharmacy was a sterile, a white box of fluorescent light located 5 miles away. I carried Sophie in, her head resting heavily on my shoulder. The pharmacist, a young man with dark circles under his eyes, looked at the prescription on file. "We have the albuterol," he said, tapping on his keyboard. "But the Pulmicort?" The insurance just kicked back a rejection. "They say you have not met the deductible for this tier of medication yet." My heart hammered. "How much is it?" I asked. "Without insurance coverage?" he asked, looking over his glasses. "It is $212.40. $200. I looked down at my purse. I had the emergency debit card Mark gave me. I knew the balance. It was $48.10. I had the grocery money, another $30 in cash. I did not have $200. "Can I pay part of it now?" I pleaded, shifting Sophie's weight on my hip. "Can you just give me a few vials? Just enough for tonight?" The pharmacist shook his head, his expression softening with pity. "I cannot break the box. Ma'am, it is policy. I could lose my license." I felt the tears welling up, hot and stinging. This was not just embarrassment. This was danger. My child could not breathe, and a piece of plastic and a digital number were standing between her and air. I stepped away from the counter, my face burning. I pulled out my phone. It was almost 4 a.m. Mark was in Boston, or at least, that is where he said he was. I did not care if I woke him up. I did not care if he was in a meeting with the President of the United States. I dialed his number. It rang, and rang, and rang. Finally, voicemail. I dialed again. This time, he picked up on the second ring. His voice was groggy, thick with sleep, and instantly irritated. "Blair? It is 4 a.m. Is the house on fire?" "Mark. It is Sophie." I sobbed, keeping my voice low so the pharmacist would not hear. "She is having an attack. The inhaler is not working. I am at the pharmacy. They need $200 for the nebulizer medicine. The insurance rejected it." There was a pause. I heard the rustle of sheets. $200? Mark repeated. "Why did the insurance reject it?" "They said we have not met the deductible." "Mark, please, transfer money to the card. Now." "She cannot breathe." I heard a heavy sigh. It was the sound of a man burdened by an incompetent staff, not a father worried about his child. "I cannot transfer it instantly." "Blair, the main accounts are locked for security overnight. You know the bank protocol. It will not clear until 9 a.m. 9 a.m? I nearly screamed. That is 5 hours away. "Mark, she is wheezing right now. Use a credit card. Give me the numbers." I left my wallet in the hotel safe downstairs. He said, "I am not going down to the lobby in my underwear. Look, it cannot be that bad. Just take her home. Put her in a steamy bathroom. That is what my mother used to do. It is free." "Steam? Are you serious?" "She needs medicine. You are overreacting." "As usual." He snapped. "You baby her. That is why she is so weak. If you had managed the household budget better, Maybe you would have an emergency fund for this. But no, you spent it all on organic pasta and fancy cleaning supplies. He was doing it again. He was twisting the knife, but I was too desperate to bleed. Mark, please, just help me. Ask your parents, he said coldly. Call your father. Beg him for the money. Tell him his son-in-law is a monster if that makes you feel better. But I am not moving money around at 4 a.m. because you failed to plan ahead. Good night, Blair. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my hand shaking so hard I nearly dropped it. A cold numbness spread through my body. He did not care. He actually did not care. I did call my father. I woke him up. I swallowed my pride, the bitter taste of shame coating my throat, and asked him to Venmo me $300. He did it instantly, without a single question, only asking if I needed him to drive over. I told him no. I told him everything was fine. I bought the medicine. I took my daughter home. I gave her the treatment. I watched her chest rise and fall rhythmically as the drug opened her airways. I sat on the floor beside her bed until the sun came up, watching the dust motes dance in the morning light. But as the fear for Sophie's life subsided, a new feeling took its place. It was a cold, hard rage. Mark had said the insurance rejected it because of the deductible. That did not make sense. We had excellent insurance. Mark constantly bragged about the premium plan his firm provided. He used it as an excuse for why his take-home pay was lower than average. He claimed the deductions for healthcare were astronomical. If we were paying so much for insurance, why was I paying $200 for asthma medicine? I stood up. My legs were stiff. I walked out of Sophie's room and down the hall to the master bedroom. The house was empty. Mark was not due back until the evening. I walked to the door of his home office. He called it the sanctuary. It was the one room in the house I was strictly forbidden to enter. He said he dealt with sensitive client information, securities and exchange commission regulations, federal compliance. He said if I moved a single paper, I could cost him his job. I turned the knob, locked. Of course, I remembered something. A year ago, during a rare moment of levity at a barbecue, Mark had made a joke to his friend Dave about hiding his scotch from me. He said he kept a key in the fake succulent plant on the bookshelf in the hallway. I had laughed then, thinking he was joking about alcohol. I walked to the bookshelf. I lifted the plastic aloe vera plant. Underneath the pot, taped to the ceramic bottom, was a small silver key. I peeled it off. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I was breaking the rules. I was crossing the line. If he found out, the consequences would be severe. But the image of Sophie gasping for air gave me courage. I unlocked the office door. The room smelled of stale air and leather. It was immaculate. The mahogany desk was clear of clutter. A wall of filing cabinets stood like sentinels in the corner. I went to the filing cabinet. I needed to find the insurance policy. I needed to see the coverage details. I needed to know if he was lying about the plan or if the insurance company had made a mistake. The drawers were labeled neatly: taxes, mortgage, investments, insurance. I pulled open the insurance drawer. I flipped through the folders. Life, car, home, health. I opened the health folder. I scanned the documents. It was a standard policy, a low deductible plan. We had met the deductible back in March. I saw the statement right there. Family deductible met March 15th. So why did the pharmacy say it was rejected? I dug deeper into the file. I found a letter from the insurance provider dated last month. Dear policyholder, please be advised that the credit card on file for your flexible spending account and copay automatic replenishment has been declined. Please update your payment method to avoid disruption at point of sale. He had stopped paying the copays. He had let the account lapse. My hands were shaking. He knew the card would be declined. He knew we had no coverage at the counter, and he still sent me there with nothing. I went to shove the folder back, angry and sickened. As I pushed the hanging files aside, my hand brushed against a thick manila envelope stuck at the very back of the drawer. It was not in a labeled slot. It was hidden, wedged behind the metal track. I pulled it out. It was heavy. I opened the clasp. Inside was a stack of papers. They were pay stubs, physical copies. Mark usually said everything was digital, that he never got paper mail. I pulled out the one on top. It was dated 2 weeks ago, October 15th. I looked at the numbers. My eyes scanned the columns, looking for the familiar figures he always told me. He told me he made $100,000 a year, after taxes, insurance, and 401k plan. He brought home about $6,000 a month. That was the math he drilled into my head. That was the math that justified the strict budget, the generic pasta, the 62-degree house. I looked at the line labeled net pay. The number was not $3,000 for the bi-weekly period. It was $5,500. I blinked. I rubbed my eyes and looked again. $5,500. Bi-weekly. That meant he was bringing home $11,000 a month. $11,000. I gasped, the air leaving my lungs as if I had been punched. I grabbed the calculator on his desk, my fingers trembling so badly I kept hitting the wrong keys. 11,000 minus 6,000. That was $5,000 every single month, for God knows how long. There was a $5,000 gap between what he earned and what he brought into our joint account. $5,000 a month. That was $60,000 a year. I felt dizzy. The room seemed to spin. I sat down heavily in his leather executive chair, the chair that cost more than my first car. Where was it going? Was he gambling? Drugs? A mistress? I frantically looked through the rest of the papers in the envelope. Behind the pay stubs was a bank statement I had never seen before. It was for an account at a bank called Sovereign Private Client Group. The account holder's name was not Mark. It was a joint account. Mark Sullivan and Agnes Sullivan, his mother. I scanned the transaction history. Every 2 weeks, on the same day, his paycheck hit. There was an automatic transfer of $2,500 into this account. Transfer description: Agnes Emergency Fund. I looked at the balance at the bottom of the page. $45,250. $45,000. He had $45,000 sitting in an account with his mother. I stared at the number until it blurred. $45,000. Just 4 hours ago, I had begged him for $200 to save our daughter's life. I had debased myself. I had listened to him call me a failure. I had listened to him tell me to beg my retired father for money, and all the while, he had $45,000 sitting there. He could have transferred the money instantly. He could have given me a credit card. He could have bought the pharmacy. He chose not to. A scream built up in my throat, primal and raw, but I clamped my hand over my mouth to stifle it. I could not scream. If I screamed, I would wake the kids. I looked around the room. The mahogany desk, the expensive leather chair, the silence. It was not a sanctuary. It was a crime scene, and the victim was my life. He was not saving for our future. He was hoarding money away from us. He was watching us starve, watching us freeze, watching me clip coupons with shaking hands, all while he sat on a pile of cash. Sayutsinghaling, 2 hash is greater than. He liked it. The realization hit me colder than the winter wind. It was not about the money. It was about the control. He enjoyed seeing me beg. He enjoyed seeing me struggle. It made him feel powerful. It made him feel like a god. He was punishing me for a $2,000 credit card debt from 5 years ago by hiding $45,000 from his family. I looked at the pay stub one last time. I memorized the numbers. I took my phone out and snapped a picture of the document, then a picture of the bank statement with his mother's name. My hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped. I put the papers back exactly as I found them. I slid the envelope behind the metal track. I closed the drawer. I locked the door. I put the key back under the fake aloe vera plant. I walked back to the kitchen. The sun was fully up now, casting long, harsh shadows across the floor. I looked at the generic pasta box sitting on the counter. I looked at the thermostat, set to 62. I was not the same woman who had walked into that office 10 minutes ago. That woman was a confused, guilty, anxious mess. That woman believed she was the problem. The woman standing in the kitchen now was something else entirely. I felt hollowed out, scraped clean of love and trust. But in that empty space, something new was beginning to burn. It was a small flame, fueled by the image of my daughter gasping for air while her father slept on a bed of lies. I opened the fridge. I took out the half-empty gallon of milk. I poured a glass for myself. I drank it all, down to the last drop. Then I walked over to the thermostat. I reached out and turned the dial. 63, 64, 65, 70. I heard the furnace roar to life in the basement, a deep, rumbling beast waking up from a long hibernation. Warm air began to push through the vents. Let him come home. Let him scream about the bill. I was ready. The house was dark, but it was no longer cold. The warmth from the furnace I had turned on that morning had settled into the walls, creating a comfortable heaviness in the air that felt foreign to me. Mark was asleep beside me. He lay on his back, his mouth slightly open, letting out a soft, rhythmic snore. He had come home late, smelling of scotch and expensive cigars, too intoxicated to notice the temperature change or the way I had looked at him during our brief, silent dinner. I lay rigid on my side of the bed, staring at the shadows dancing on the ceiling. My heart was beating, a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a stark contrast to the slow, heavy pulse of the man sleeping inches away. I could not close my eyes. Every time I blinked, I saw the numbers on the pay stub. $11,000, $45,000. The numbers burned like neon signs in my mind. I needed more. The papers in the office were proof of the money, but they did not explain the why. They did not explain the cruelty. I needed to see inside his head. I needed to see the thoughts he hid behind that mask of weary martyrdom. I turned my head slowly to look at the nightstand on his side. His phone was there, plugged into the charger. It was a sleek, top-of-the-line model that he upgraded every year for business reasons. Or so he said. I sat up. The mattress springs creaked softly. I froze, holding my breath. Mark grunted, shifted his leg, and settled back into a deep sleep. I slid out of bed, my bare feet sinking into the plush carpet. I crept around to his side. My hands were sweating. I felt like a thief in my own bedroom, a criminal intruding on the privacy of a stranger. And in many ways, he was a stranger. I reached out and disconnected the phone from the charging cable. The screen lit up, casting a harsh, ghostly blue light across his face. Enter passcode. I did not know the code. He changed it frequently, citing security protocols, but I knew his biometrics. I looked at his hand resting on the duvet. It was a large hand, the fingers thick and strong, the hand that controlled the remote, the thermostat, and my entire life. I gently lifted his right hand. It was heavy, dead weight. He twitched. I stopped, my heart leaping into my throat. If he woke up now, if he caught me hovering over him with his phone, the explosion would be catastrophic. He would turn it around on me. He would call me paranoid, crazy, invasive. He let out a long sigh and turned his head to the side. He did not wake up. I guided his thumb to the sensor at the bottom of the screen. Sao Yutsing Hao Ling. Tavo. Click. The phone unlocked. The rows of colorful applications appeared, mocking me with their cheerfulness. I moved quickly. I went to the banking application first. I needed to confirm that the paper statement was not an anomaly. I needed to see the digital trail. I opened the application. It required a second Face ID. I pointed the phone at his sleeping face. It unlocked instantly. There it was. The main checking account. The balance was low, just as he always claimed. But then I clicked on the transfer history every month. On the 1st and the 15th, a transfer labeled auto draft to Agnes Sullivan was processed. $2,500 each time. $5,000 a month. I scrolled back. July, June, May, April. The list went on and on. An endless river of money flowing out of our home and into his mother's pocket. I did the mental math. In the last 2 years alone, he had siphoned off over $100,000. $100,000. That money could have paid for Sophie's asthma medicine 1,000 times over. It could have filled our fridge with fresh vegetables and meat. It could have fixed the drafty windows. It could have paid off the debt that he held over my head like a guillotine. He chose to let us suffer. I closed the banking application. I felt sick, a physical nausea rising in my gut. But I was not done. I needed to understand the malice. I opened his messaging application. There were threads with clients, his mother, and a group chat titled The Wolf Pack. I clicked on the Wolf Pack. It was a chat with 3 of his friends from the golf club. Men I had met at Christmas parties. Men who smiled at me and told me I was a lucky woman. I scrolled up to yesterday. Mark, you guys will not believe the drama today. The wife is freaking out about the electric bill. $200 and she is acting like we are homeless. Dave, did you tell her to put on a sweater? Mark, I told her to toughen the kids up. She is so soft. She actually wanted to buy organic pasta. I shut that down fast. 50 cents difference. It is the principle of the thing. And Steve, you have to keep them on a tight leash. Mark, give them an inch and they take the credit card. Mark, I know. I handled it. I pulled the dead brother card at dinner. Works every time. As soon as I mention Michael, she folds. It is the ultimate silencer. Best emotional leverage I have. I stopped breathing. The phone nearly slipped from my clammy fingers. I pulled the dead brother card. Sao Jing Hao Ling. 2 hash is greater than. It is the ultimate silencer. I read the words again, hoping I had misunderstood, hoping it was a typo. He was talking about his brother, Michael, the brother who died in a horrific car crash when they were 19. The tragedy that Mark claimed had broken him, the trauma that he used to explain his need for control, his fear of poverty, his harsh discipline when he cried at night about Michael. I held him when he stared blankly at the wall on Michael's birthday. I excused his cruelty. I thought he was a wounded man trying to hold his world together. But here, in the cold blue light of a text message, it was a joke. It was a tactic. It was a card to be played to shut up his nagging wife. I scrolled further back. Mark just transferred the monthly stash to Mom. The fund is looking fat, almost $50,000 now. Thinking about looking at those beach condos in Florida next month. Dave, does the wife know? Mark, are you kidding? She thinks we are broke. I keep her hungry. It keeps her dependent. If she knew how much I actually made, she would be out the door with half of it. No way. I am building my empire. She is just the help. Steve, genius. Keep them desperate. Keep them loyal. Mark, exactly. She is terrified of money now. I have gaslit her so hard she shakes when she sees a bill. It is actually kind of pathetic, but it works. She is the perfect little housewife because she thinks she owes me her life. I lowered the phone. The room seemed to tilt. The walls of the bedroom, the photos of our wedding on the dresser, the sleeping form of my husband, it all twisted into something grotesque. I was not living with a strict, stressed provider. I was living with a sociopath. He was not saving money for us. He was stealing our life to build a separate future for himself. He was starving his own children to buy a beach condo. He was using the memory of his dead brother to psychologically torture me. She is just the help. It is actually kind of pathetic. I looked at him, really looked at him, in the shadows. His face looked slack and empty. There was no love there. There never had been. I was an accessory, a broodmare, a housekeeper who worked for free because she was convinced she was in debt. I felt something snap inside me. It was a distinct, audible crack in my soul. It was the sound of the Blair I used to be. The trusting, anxious, apologetic Blair, finally breaking into pieces. I quietly placed the phone back on the charger. I wiped the screen on my pajama pants to remove my fingerprints. I stood there for a moment, watching him sleep. The urge to pick up the heavy brass lamp on the nightstand and bring it down on his head was so strong, so visceral, that my muscles twitched. I wanted to hurt him. I wanted to make him feel the fear I felt every time the mailman arrived. I wanted to make him gasp for air like Sophie. But violence would make me the villain. Violence would take my children away. And he would win. He would be the victim again. Saluting due cancelletto è maggiore di no. I backed away slowly, retreating into the hallway. I walked into the bathroom and locked the door. I turned on the faucet to mask the sound of my weeping, but I did not weep. I stared at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes dark and hollow. I looked like a ghost, but ghosts are dangerous. Ghosts haunt. He thought I was pathetic. He thought I was weak. He thought he had broken me so thoroughly that I would never bite back. He was wrong. He had created a monster, but not the one he thought. He had stripped me of everything. My confidence, my financial independence, my voice. But in doing so, he had taken away the one thing that kept me compliant. My fear of losing his love. I realize now that I never had his love. There was nothing left to lose. And a person with nothing to lose is the most dangerous person in the world. I splashed cold water on my face. I watched the droplets run down my skin like tears I refused to shed. I would not confront him yet. I would not scream. I would not give him the satisfaction of seeing me unravel. If I confronted him now, he would deny it. He would hide the money better. He would manipulate the narrative. I needed to be smarter. I needed to be colder. I needed to be him. I walked out of the bathroom and went to the kitchen. I sat at the island where he had eaten his $40 sushi. I pulled a notebook from the junk drawer. I began to write, not a diary entry, but a battle plan. Step 1, gather evidence. Step 2, secure a job. Step 3, protect the children. Step 4, destroy him. The spiral had ended. I had hit the bottom. And now, the only way was up, through the wreckage of the life he thought he owned. The kitchen was bathed in the harsh, unforgiving light of a gray Thursday morning. I had sent Leo and Sophie to the neighbor's house for an hour, claiming I needed to deep clean the carpets. It was a lie, but lies were becoming my second language. I needed the house empty. I needed the battlefield clear. Mark was sitting at the island, drinking his artisanal coffee, scrolling through his iPad. He looked the picture of corporate success, calm and untouchable. He did not know that the ground beneath him was about to crack open. I walked over to him. My hands were steady. I held the manila envelope I had retrieved from his office earlier that morning. I did not throw it. I did not scream. I placed it gently on the granite counter, right on top of his iPad screen. Mark looked up, his brow furrowed in annoyance. "What is this?" he asked, his voice flat. "Open it," I said. He stared at me for a second, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. The air between us crackled with static. He put down his coffee mug and opened the clasp. He pulled out the papers, the pay stubs, the bank statements, the evidence of the $45,000 he had funneled to his mother while I begged for pennies. I watched his face closely, waiting for the guilt. I expected him to pale. I expected him to stammer, to make excuses, to look afraid, but he did not. Mark looked at the numbers, then looked back at me. His expression did not change. If anything, he looked bored. "So you broke into my office?" he said. "That is a violation of trust." "Blair, violation of trust?" I repeated, my voice rising despite my best efforts to keep it level. "You have $45,000 sitting in a secret account. You watched our daughter turn blue last night because you said we had no money. You let me beg my father for $200 while you are sitting on a fortune." Mark stood up slowly. He smoothed the front of his shirt. He did not look like a man caught in a lie. He looked like a CEO dealing with a disgruntled intern. "It is not a fortune, Blair. It is a safety net, and it is not your money. We are married," I screamed, the dam finally breaking. "It is our money. It is marital assets. You are legally stealing from this family." Mark laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound that chilled my blood. "Stealing? I earned it. I wake up at 5 in the morning. I deal with the stress. I bring home the kill. You stay home and push a vacuum cleaner. You consume resources. Blair, you do not create them." He walked around the island, closing the distance between us. He loomed over me, his eyes cold and hard. "I put that money away because I knew you would blow it. Look at you. You are hysterical. If I gave you access to the main accounts, we would be bankrupt in a month. You proved that 5 years ago with your little decorating spree." "5 years ago," I shouted back. "It was $2,000. You have hidden over $100,000 in 2 years. You are starving your children. I am protecting them from their mother's incompetence." He roared, slamming his hand on the counter. Before I could respond, the front door opened. I froze. I had locked it. Agnes walked in. My mother-in-law stood in the hallway, shaking her umbrella. She was wearing a tweed coat that cost more than my entire wardrobe. Mark must have texted her the moment I sent the kids away. He knew this was coming. What is all the shouting? Agnes asked, her voice dripping with disdain. She walked into the kitchen, ignoring me, and went straight to her son. Mark, darling, you look stressed. She found the account. Mom, Mark said, gesturing to the papers. Agnes turned to look at me. Her eyes were small and beady, like a hawk spotting a field mouse. She did not look surprised either. Well, she sniffed. I told you she was a snoop. Those quiet ones always are, always digging for gold that does not belong to them. Belong to me? I looked between them, incredulous. Agnes, that account is in your name. He is hiding our family's money in your name to avoid taxes and to keep it from his wife. Agnes smirked. She walked over to the counter and picked up the bank statement. It is called estate planning. Dear, Mark is a very dutiful son. He is helping me manage my retirement. And in return, I am helping him safeguard his assets from Soyijing Holing. 2 hash is greater than liabilities. Liabilities. That was what they called me. Not a wife, not a mother, a liability. We are closing on the condo in Sarasota next month, Agnes said casually to Mark. As if I were not standing there. The oceanfront unit? It will be a lovely place for you to decompose after tax season. Just you. We do not need the noise of children down there. I felt the room spinning. They were buying a vacation home, a beach condo in Florida, while I was patching holes in Leo's sneakers with duct tape, while I was diluting the dish soap to make it last longer. You are monsters, I whispered. Both of you, Agnes laughed. You are dramatic. Blair, that is your problem. You think the world owes you a living. You should be grateful Mark keeps a roof over your head. With your credit history, you could not rent a cardboard box in this town. Mark crossed his arms, looking at me with a mixture of pity and disgust. Here is the reality. Blair, he said, you have no income. You have no savings. You have no lawyer. If you try to leave, I will bury you in court. I will paint you as unstable. I will bring up the debt. I will bring up your history of anxiety. I will take the kids, and you will end up working at a diner, living in a studio apartment, seeing them every other weekend. Is that what you want? I stared at him. I wanted to scratch his eyes out. I wanted to burn the house down. But my inner voice, the one that had woken up last night, suddenly spoke up. It was cold and sharp. He is right. If I walked out that door right now, I would lose. I had $30 in my wallet. He had high-powered lawyers on speed dial. He had Agnes and her money. He had the narrative of the hard-working father and the spendthrift wife. I would lose the children. Sophie needed expensive medicine. Leo needed stability. If I left now, I would be destroying them. I needed time. I needed money. I needed to document everything. I looked at Mark's smug face. I looked at Agnes's cruel smile. They were waiting for me to explode again. They wanted me to scream so they could call me crazy. I took a deep breath. I forced my hands to uncurl from fists. I lowered my head. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper. I needed to summon tears, but not tears of rage. Tears of defeat. I let my shoulders slump. I let a sob escape my throat. You are right, I whispered, looking at the floor. The silence in the room was heavy. Mark and Agnes exchanged a look. What did you say? Mark asked. Suspicious? I said you are right. I said, looking up at him through wet lashes. I am sorry. I panicked. I saw the numbers and I just... Soyijing Haleen. 2 hashes greater than I got scared. I know I am bad with money. I know I made mistakes in the past. I walked over to the counter and pushed the papers back toward him. I do not want to end up alone. Mark, I do not want to lose the kids. Please? I am sorry I snooped. It will not happen again. I saw the tension leave Mark's body. His ego, inflated and fragile, absorbed my apology like a sponge. He wanted to believe he was the master. He wanted to believe I was broken. He said, shaking his head. I hope you mean that, Blair, because I am running out of patience. I do. I lead. My voice was steady now, fortified by hatred. I trust you. Mark, you are the financial expert. You know what is best for the family. If you say we need to save for the condo, Xiao Yudzing Haoling, 2 hash is greater than we need to save. Agnes scoffed, but she looked pleased. That is better. At least she knows her place. Mark walked over and patted my head, exactly like one would pat a dog that had just stopped barking. Good girl, he said. Now, clean up this mess. Agnes and I are going to lunch to discuss the closing costs. We will be back late. Have dinner ready. And Blair, make something decent tonight. I am tired of the slop. I nodded. Yes. And Mark, of course. They left 10 minutes later. I watched from the window as they got into Mark's luxury sedan. They were laughing. They were already celebrating their victory over the foolish, weak woman inside the house. I turned back to the empty kitchen. I was not weak. I was patient. I walked over to the trash can where Mark had thrown the Ruth's Chris receipt 2 days ago. I dug it out. I smoothed it flat. I went to the counter and picked up the pay stubs he had left there in his arrogance. I took out my phone. I began to photograph everything, every page, every line item. Then I went to the computer. I opened a new email account, one with a name he would never guess. I emailed the photos to myself. Then I went to the laundry room. I reached into the back of the linen closet, inside a box of old winter coats, and pulled out a small digital voice recorder I had bought years ago for a college lecture and never used. I put fresh batteries in it. Xiao Yudzing Haoling, 2 hash is greater than I tested it. My name is Blair. I whispered into the microphone, and I am going to take everything from him. I slipped the recorder into my pocket. They wanted a submissive wife? I would give them the performance of a lifetime. I would be so perfect, so quiet, so obedient that they would never see the knife until it was already buried in their backs. I picked up the phone and dialed the number for the public library. Hello, I said when the librarian answered. I would like to inquire about the open assistant position. Yes, I can start immediately. No, my husband does not need to know. Xiao Yudzing Haoling. 2. I hung up. The war had begun. And for the first time in years, I was not afraid. I was hungry. The house had become a mausoleum. In the weeks following my failed rebellion, a suffocating silence settled over the rooms, heavy and thick like a wool blanket soaked in ice water. Mark did not hit me. He did not scream. He did not need to. He had realized that the most effective way to break a woman who was already cracking was to systematically dismantle her dignity, piece by tiny piece, until there was nothing left but a shell that cooked and cleaned. He called it the rehabilitation period. It started with the debit card. On a Monday morning, while I was packing lunches with the cheapest bologna I could find, Mark held out his hand. He did not say a word. He just stood there, palm open, expecting compliance. I placed the plastic card in his hand. He slipped it into his pocket and replaced it with a single $20 bill. This is for the week, he said, his voice devoid of inflection. Milk, bread, eggs, If you run out, you figure it out. Bake your own bread. You have plenty of time. $20 for a family of 4 for 7 days. It was mathematically impossible, but I did not argue. I nodded, staring at the green portrait of Andrew Jackson, feeling the familiar burn of humiliation behind my eyes. Thank you, Mark, I whispered. He smiled then. It was a terrifying expression, tight and satisfied. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers were cold. See, it is not so hard to be grateful, is it? We will get you back on track. Blair, we will curb these spending impulses of yours. The cruelty escalated at dinner. That evening, Mark came home with a shopping bag from an upscale butcher shop. He unpacked 2 thick ribeye steaks, a bundle of asparagus, and a bottle of Merlot. He set them on the counter next to the pot of boiling water I had prepared for our dinner. Instant noodles. Again, cook these medium rare, he instructed, pointing to the steaks, and do not burn the garlic butter. I cooked his meal, the kitchen filled with the intoxicating aroma of searing meat, rosemary, and thyme. My stomach cramped violently, a physical protest against the hunger that had become my constant companion. I plated the steaks perfectly. I poured the wine. I set the table for 2. Mark and his mother, Agnes, who had invited herself over to oversee my progress. I placed a bowl of limp, salty noodles in front of myself, and 2 smaller bowls for Leo and Sophie. We sat together. The contrast was grotesque. Mark sliced into his steak, the pink juices running onto the white porcelain. He took a bite, closing his eyes in exaggerated pleasure. Agnes did the same, dabbing the corners of her mouth with a linen napkin. Delicious, Agnes purred. You really must give me the name of that butcher. Mark, it is so tender. Mark swirled his wine. You get what you pay for. Mom, quality requires investment. Unlike some things, he gestured with his fork toward my bowl of noodles. Blair, you are not eating, he observed. I picked up my fork. The smell of the artificial chicken flavoring was making me nauseous, especially when mixed with the scent of the steak I was forbidden to touch. I am eating, I said softly. Good, he said. It is important you understand the value of $1. That bowl cost 19 cents. That is all your contribution to this household is worth right now. When you learn to manage resources, maybe you will earn a place at the grown-up table. I looked at Leo. My 5-year-old son was staring at his father's plate, his eyes wide and hungry. He pushed his noodles around. Uninterested? Daddy, can I have a bite? Leo asked, his voice small. Mark stopped chewing. The air in the room froze. He looked at Leo, then at me, as if I had put the boy up to it. Leo, we talked about this, Mark said sternly. This is earned food. Mommy spent all our money on bad choices a long time ago, so now we have to save. If I give you this steak, we might not have a house to live in. Do you want to live on the street? Leo shook his head, tears welling in his eyes. No. Daddy, then eat your noodles and thank your mother for her poor planning. My hand drifted to the pocket of my cardigan. Inside, resting against my hip, was the small digital voice recorder. I pressed the raised button on the side with my thumb. I felt a tiny vibration. It was recording every word, every crunch of his knife, every whimper from my son. I lowered my head and took a bite of the noodles. They tasted like salt and hatred. Inner monologue. Enjoy your steak. Oh, Mark, choke on it. Every calorie you consume is just another line of evidence in my file. You think you are teaching me a lesson? You are handing me the weapon that will slit your throat. The next day, I enacted the second phase of my plan. I told Mark I was volunteering at the library for their annual charity book drive. He was suspicious at first, interrogating me about gas mileage and time management, but eventually, he agreed. He liked the idea of me doing charity work. It fit the image of the penitent, dutiful wife he was constructing for the neighbors. I drove to the library, but not to volunteer. I walked into the office of Mrs. Gable, the head librarian. She was a stern woman with glasses on a chain, the kind of woman who brooked no nonsense. I had worked for her 2 summers during college. A lifetime ago. Blair, she said, looking up from her desk. I was surprised to get your call. It has been years. I sat down. I smoothed my skirt, trying to hide the fact that my hands were trembling. I needed this job. I needed it more than I needed air. I need work. Mrs. Gable, I said, my voice steady. I know you are looking for a part-time archivist. I know the Dewey Decimal System. I know the database. I can start today. Mrs. Gable looked at me over the rim of her spectacles. She took in my frayed cardigan, my pale skin, the dark circles under my eyes that makeup could not hide. She was a perceptive woman. She saw the desperation radiating off me like heat. The pay is $15 an hour. Blair, it is not much. It is perfect, I said. And the hours? Can you manage the schedule with your Soyutsing 2 hash is greater than family obligations? I will make it work. Please. She studied me for a long moment. Then she opened a drawer and pulled out a W-4 form. Fill this out. We need someone to catalog the microfiche in the basement. It is dusty. Lonely work. No cell service down there. I took the pen. I almost cried with relief. Dusty. Lonely. And without cell service meant Mark could not reach me. It meant a sanctuary. I filled out the form. When I reached the line for the bank account for direct deposit, I paused. I could not use the joint account. Mark would see the deposit immediately. I can write you a paper check every 2 weeks, Mrs. Gable said quietly. As if reading my mind, I looked up at her. There was no pity in her eyes, only a quiet understanding. Women know. We always know. Thank you, I whispered. I spent the next 4 hours in the basement of the library. It was cool and smelled of old paper and dust. For the first time in months, I could breathe. I worked methodically, cataloging old newspapers from the 1990s. I read stories about local politics, bake sales, and obituaries. It was mundane, and it was beautiful. I earned $60 that afternoon. $60 that Mark did not know about. $60 that belonged to me. I hid the check in the lining of my winter boot when I got to the car. It was a small victory, but it felt like a revolution. When I returned home, the atmosphere had shifted from oppressive to dangerous. The house was freezing. I could see my breath in the hallway. I checked the thermostat. It was set to 58 degrees. I found Mark in the living room, wearing a thick cashmere sweater, reading a book. The kids were huddled under a blanket on the floor, watching a tablet. Their lips were pale. Mark, it is freezing in here, I said, dropping my bag. He did not look up. Oil prices went up 3 cents a gallon today. We need to compensate. Sophie is coughing again, I said, fighting the urge to scream. Mark, turn the heat up, just to 65. Please. He closed his book with a snap. You want heat? Then stop wasting electricity. I saw the light in the bathroom was left on for 5 minutes this morning after you showered. 5 minutes? Blair, Do you know how much that adds up to over a year? He was lying. I knew I had turned it off. He was gaslighting me again, creating crimes so he could dispense punishments. He stood up and walked over to me. He was smiling, but his eyes were dead. You want to know what tragedy is? Blair? Tragedy is a man working himself to death for a family that does not appreciate him. Tragedy is a wife who cannot follow simple instructions. The cold is good for them. It kills the germs. He walked past me toward the kitchen. I reached into my pocket and stopped the recording. I had it. The cold is good for them. Later that night, tragedy struck for real. I was in the bathroom, trying to wash the smell of the library dust from my hands with cold water. I heard a crash from the kitchen, followed by a high-pitched scream. It was Leo. I ran out. In the kitchen, Leo was standing over a shattered ceramic bowl, one of Agnes's favorite antique serving bowls that she had insisted we keep. He had been trying to climb the counter to reach the cracker box because he was still hungry after the noodle dinner. Mark was already there. He was gripping Leo's upper arm, his fingers digging into the soft flesh. "Look what you did," Mark shouted. His face was red, contorted in a way I had never seen before. "This bowl is worth more than you are." "Mark, stop," I screamed, throwing myself between them. "Let him go." Mark shoved me back. He did not hit me, but the force of the shove sent me stumbling into the refrigerator. "He is clumsy and stupid, just like you," Mark yelled, shaking Leo. "You destroy everything." Leo was sobbing, hyperventilating. "Daddy, I am sorry. I am hungry. I am sorry." Mark raised his hand. Time froze. I saw the hand go up. I saw the intent. He was going to strike our 5-year-old son. Inner monologue. "Do it. Do it. You bastard. Hit him. Let me record the sound of your hand hitting his face. Let me have the final nail for your coffin." But the mother in me overrode the strategist. "Sauting Halin, tu e canceletto e majority." "No." I lunged forward, grabbing Mark's wrist. I dug my fingernails into his skin, drawing blood. "Do not touch him." I hissed. My voice was low, guttural, a sound that did not belong to the submissive wife. "If you touch him, Mark, I swear to God." "Sawi Jinghaling, R. Jinghao Dayu." Mark looked at me. He looked at the scratch marks on his wrist. He looked at the fear in his son's eyes. He dropped Leo's arm. "You are crazy," he muttered. Stepping back, "You are actually psychotic." Attacking me? In my own house? He looked at the blood on his arm, then looked at me with a chilling calmness. "That is assault. Blair, domestic assault. I could have you arrested right now." He laughed. A short, sharp bark. "Clean this up and get that brat out of my sight. If I hear one more sound from either of you, I am cutting the food budget to 0. You can eat air for all I care." He turned and walked out of the kitchen, heading upstairs to his warm office. I sank to the floor, pulling Leo into my lap. We sat among the shards of the shattered antique bowl. He was shaking violently. I rocked him, whispering meaningless comforts into his ear. My hand went to my pocket. The recorder was still there. I had missed the visual of the near hit, but I had captured the threat. I had captured the sound of the shove. I had captured his laughter. I looked down at the broken porcelain. It was beautiful and irreplaceable. Now, just sharp garbage, just like my marriage. But unlike the bowl, I could be put back together. I would rebuild myself with sharper edges. I kissed the top of Leo's head. "We are leaving, baby," I whispered, so softly that only the walls could hear. "Soon, I promise." I spent the rest of the night picking up the pieces, slicing my fingers on the sharp edges, bleeding onto the linoleum. I did not bandage the cuts. I wanted the pain. I wanted to remember exactly how this felt, because the next time Mark saw blood, it would not be mine. The morning of the escape did not feel like a movie. There was no dramatic music, no breathless running through the rain, no squealing tires. It was terrifyingly quiet. It was a Tuesday, a day that felt crisp and sharp, like the edge of a new sheet of paper. Mark left for work at 7 o'clock. He did not kiss me goodbye. He simply tapped his watch, reminded me that the electric bill was still unpaid, and told me to keep the lights off until sunset. I watched his luxury sedan disappear down the winding suburban street, the taillights fading like two red eyes closing. The moment he was gone, the clock in my head started ticking. I did not pack suitcases. Suitcases were suspicious. Suitcases were evidence of premeditation that he could use to claim I was unstable. Instead, I packed 4 trash bags. To the neighbors, it would look like I was finally doing that deep clean Mark was always nagging me about. Inside the black plastic, hidden beneath layers of old towels, were our birth certificates, our passports, my secret stash of cash from the library job, and the digital recorder. Leo, Sophie, we are going on a field trip, I said, my voice steady. Sophie looked up from her dry toast. Is Daddy coming? No, baby, just us. I drove them to the Westport Academy. It was a fortress disguised as a school. It had stone walls, wrought iron gates, and armed security guards who looked like they had retired from the Secret Service. It was the most expensive childcare facility in the state. The tuition for 2 children was $4,000 a month. I walked into the admissions office. I placed a cashier's check on the mahogany desk. It was money my father had wired to me secretly the night before. After I had finally broken down and told him everything, it was my entire inheritance. Advanced early, I need immediate placement. I told the director, and I need to be very clear about the security protocols. My husband, Mark Sullivan, is not allowed on the premises. He is not allowed to pick them up. If he shows up, you call the police. Here is the temporary restraining order application I filed this morning. The director, a woman with kind eyes and a steel spine, looked at the paperwork. She saw the bruises on my arm, the ones I had inflicted on myself by gripping the steering wheel too hard. Or perhaps they were phantom pains from the life I was leaving. She nodded. They are safe here, Mrs. Sullivan. No one gets past the gate without a biometric scan. I kissed Leo and Sophie goodbye. I smelled their hair, the scent of baby shampoo and innocence. I told them I loved them. I told them I would be back before snack time. I walked out of the school empty-handed. My heart felt like it had been ripped out of my chest and left in that classroom. But I knew they were safer behind those iron gates than they ever were in their father's house. Now, I had to bait the trap. I drove back to the house. I parked my minivan in the driveway, slightly askew, as if I had arrived in a hurry. I unlocked the front door and left it wide open. I went into the kitchen. I took the half-eaten box of instant noodles and spilled it across the floor. I overturned a chair. I wanted it to look chaotic. I wanted it to look like a struggle, but mostly, I wanted to feed his paranoia. Then, I sat in the living room chair, facing the door, and I waited. I knew he tracked my phone. I knew he checked the Nest cameras. He would see the car. He would see the open door. He would come. At 11 o'clock, the sedan roared up the driveway. Mark burst through the door. He was panting, his tie askew. He looked wild, not worried wild, like a father fearing for his family, but possession wild, like a dragon returning to find its cave looted. "Blair," he screamed. I stood up slowly. I was wearing my best dress, a navy blue sheath I had not worn in years. I had applied makeup. I looked composed. I looked expensive. "I am here, Mark." He spun around, his eyes darting to the overturned chair, the spilled noodles, and then finally landing on me. He looked confused by my calmness. "Where are the kids? Why is the door open? What the hell is going on?" "The kids are at school," I said. "A real school, not the neighbor's basement." "School?" He laughed. A harsh, incredulous bark. "We cannot afford school. Who gave you permission to enroll them? Go get them. Now." Saluting howling. "Due cancelletto è maggiore di no." The word hung in the air between us, heavy and absolute. Mark stopped laughing. His face darkened, turning a shade of purple that clashed with his collar. He took a step toward me. "What did you say to me?" I said no. "Mark, I am not getting them, and I am not cooking noodles tonight, and I am not begging you for $20. I am leaving you." He stared at me for a long moment, processing the rebellion. Then a sneer curled his lip. "Leaving me? You? You have nothing. Blair, you are a leech. You have no money, no job, no home. You walk out that door, and I will destroy you. I will cut you off so completely you will starve. I will take the kids, and you will never see them again." I smiled. It was a cold, razor-sharp smile that I had practiced in the mirror. "You cannot cut off what you never gave." "Mark," he lunged for me. I did not flinch. I held up my phone. "I am live streaming, Mark, to a private cloud server. Everything you do right now is being recorded." He froze. His hand hovered inches from my face. He looked at the phone, then back at me. The realization that he was being watched, even digitally, checked his violence. He cared too much about his image to beat his wife on camera. Instead, he did something worse. He pulled out his own phone. "You want to play games?" He spat. "Fine. Let us see how brave you are when the police get here." He dialed 911. He put it on speaker, staring me dead in the eyes with a look of pure malevolence. 911. "What is your emergency?" "My name is Mark Sullivan," he said, his voice instantly transforming into a panicked, breathless sob. It was an Oscar-worthy performance. "I need help. My wife, Saoyutsing Haoling, 2#, is greater than she has had a psychotic break. She has taken our children. I came home and the house is trashed. She is sitting here laughing. She is dangerous. I think she hurt them. Please, send someone immediately." He hung up and smirked at me. "Kidnapping, Blair, child endangerment, domestic disturbance. By the time the cops are done with you, you will be in a psych ward, and I will have full custody. You just lost everything." I sat back down. I crossed my legs. "We will see," I said. 10 minutes later, the house was swarming with uniforms. 2 police cruisers were parked on the lawn. The lights flashed blue and red, bouncing off the pristine white siding of our colonial house. The officers entered with guns drawn, expecting a violent, deranged woman. What they found was Mark, pacing the floor and weeping fake tears, and me, sitting calmly with my hands in my lap. "Officer," Mark cried, rushing toward a burly sergeant. "Thank God you are here. She is crazy. She hid the kids. She attacked me, Look at the kitchen. The sergeant looked at the spilled noodles. He looked at me. Ma'am, stand up slowly, he ordered. Where are the children? I stood up. I did not raise my voice. I kept my hands visible. The children are at the Westport Academy. Officer, they are safe. I enrolled them this morning because my husband has been starving them. Starving them, Mark shouted, throwing his hands up. See, she is delusional. I make 6 figures. We live in Westport. Does this look like a starving household? She is off her medication. The sergeant looked at Mark's expensive suit, then at my worn dress. He looked at the nice furniture. He was swaying toward Mark's narrative. Men like Mark always got the benefit of the doubt. They looked like the law. Ma'am, I am going to need you to come with us, the sergeant said, reaching for his handcuffs. We need to verify the children's safety. Mark grinned. It was a subtle, triumphant twitch of his lips that only I could see. Wait, I said. I reached into my large tote bag. The officers tensed. I am just getting a binder, I said calmly. I pulled out a thick, black binder. It was 3 inches thick. I opened it on the coffee table. Officer, before you arrest me, I think you should look at this. What is this? The sergeant asked, annoyed. This is the financial reality of this household. I said. I flipped to the first page. It was the photo of the pay stub showing $11,000 a month. Next to it was the bank statement showing the $45,000 in the secret account. And this, I said, flipping the page, is the receipt from the pharmacy rejecting my daughter's asthma medication for lack of payment. I flipped again. This is a picture of our refrigerator for the last 6 months. Empty. I flipped again. This is a transcript of a recording where my husband threatens to beat our 5-year-old son because he was hungry. The sergeant stopped. He looked at the photos. He looked at the numbers. Mark stepped forward, his confidence wavering. That is private financial information. She stole that. She has no right. The sergeant held up a hand to silence Mark. He picked up the binder. He read the transcript. He looked at the photo of the bruised arm, the one Mark had grabbed weeks ago. Is this true? The sergeant asked Mark, his voice dropping the polite tone. You have $50,000 in the bank, but you refuse to buy medicine for a child. It is my money, Mark shrieked, his mask slipping. I earned it. She is a spender. I have to control the assets or she will ruin us. That is not a crime. Being cheap is not a crime. It is when it constitutes financial abuse and child neglect, I said quietly. I pulled out the digital recorder. I pressed play. Mark's voice filled the room, tinny but clear. Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling. 2 hash is greater than. If I hear one more sound from either of you, I am cutting the food budget to 0. You can eat air for all I care. Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling. R. Jing Hao Da Yu. The silence that followed was deafening. The officers looked at Mark with a new expression. It was not respect anymore. It was disgust. Mark looked around the room. He realized the walls were closing in. He realized that the narrative he had carefully constructed, the narrative of the long-suffering husband and the crazy wife, was crumbling under the weight of receipts and recordings. You, Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling, 2 hashes greater than you set me up, he stammered, pointing a shaking finger at me. You bitch? You planned this? Yes, I said. I did. The sergeant turned to Mark. Mr. Sullivan, we are going to need to do a welfare check on the children, and we are going to file a report with Child Protective Services based on this recording. Child Protective Services? Mark went pale. You cannot call Child Protective Services I work in finance. A child protective services investigation will ruin my clearance. It will ruin my career. You should have thought about that before you told your son to eat air. The sergeant said coldly. Mark turned on me. The rage took over. The cold calculation was gone, replaced by the fury of a narcissist who has lost control. You did this, he screamed, lunging at me again. I will kill you. I will kill you for this. This time, the police did not hesitate. 2 officers tackled Mark before he could reach me. They slammed him face first into the carpet, the expensive Persian rug he loved more than his children. Get off me. Do you know who I am? Mark howled as they wrenched his arms behind his back. You are a suspect in a domestic violence investigation, the sergeant said, snapping the handcuffs onto Mark's wrists. The metallic click was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. They hauled him up. His nose was bleeding. His suit was crumpled. He looked at me with eyes full of hatred, but also full of fear. For the first time in our marriage, he was the one who was afraid. I stood there, clutching my binder. I did not look away. I will sue you, Mark screamed as they dragged him out the door. I will take everything. You have nothing left to take. Mark, I whispered. I watched them shove him into the back of the police cruiser. The neighbors were all out on their lawns now, watching. Mrs. Higgins from next door, the one Mark always tried to impress with his lawn care, stared with her mouth open. Mark's reputation, his precious image, was being carted away in handcuffs. The sergeant turned to me. Ma'am, do you have a safe place to go? Yes, I said. I have my parents, and I have a job. He nodded, touching the brim of his hat. Good luck. Mrs. Sullivan. I watched the cruiser drive away. I stood alone in the driveway of the house that had been my prison. I looked at the manicured lawn. I looked at the empty windows. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was lightness. The heavy stone of fear that had sat on my lungs for years was gone. I walked to my car. My legs felt weak, but my spirit was soaring. I had faced the monster. And I had not just survived. I had won, but I knew this was not the end. Mark was down, but he was not out. He had lawyers. He had his mother. He had money. The battle in the house was over, but the war in the courtroom was just beginning. I got into my car and drove toward the school. I needed to hold my children. I needed to buy them ice cream. I needed to spend $5 on something frivolous and joyful, just because I could. Inner monologue. You wanted a fight. Mark, you wanted to teach me a lesson about value? Well, class is in session, and today's lesson is, you get what you pay for. The internet is a weapon far more efficient than a knife. A knife leaves a messy wound that heals into a scar. But a scandal on the internet is an infection that festers forever. I sat in my father's study, surrounded by the smell of old paper and pipe tobacco. It was a safe smell, a sharp contrast to the antiseptic scent of cleaning fluid that permeated my own home. My father was downstairs playing Connect 4 with Leo and Sophie. I could hear their laughter drifting up through the floorboards. It sounded like music. On the screen of my father's desktop computer, a draft email was open to the Ethics Committee, Sterling and Partners Financial Group. Subject: Violation of Fiduciary Duty and Code of Conduct, Mark Sullivan. My finger hovered over the mouse. I knew what this click meant. Mark defined himself by 2 things: his net worth and his job title. I had already exposed his net worth as a fraud. Now, I was coming for the title. In the corporate world of high finance, perception is reality. A man who cannot manage his own household. A man who starves his children to hoard cash. is a man who cannot be trusted with client millions. It is a liability. It is bad press. I attached the police report. I attached the transcript of the recording where he admitted to hiding assets. I attached the bank statements showing the funneling of funds to a third party to avoid tax implications. I took a deep breath. For years, Mark had threatened to ruin me. He had told me I was nothing without him. I clicked send. The destruction was almost immediate. Mark had been released on bail that morning. His lawyer, a slick man named Mr. Henderson, who charged $500 an hour, had managed to spin the arrest as a misunderstanding. Mark had walked out of the precinct looking disheveled but arrogant, convinced he could smooth this over. He thought he could go back to the office, charm his boss, and bury me in legal motions. He went straight to his office in downtown Stamford. He wanted to project normalcy. I did not see it happen, but news in Westport travels faster than light. It travels on the whispers of housewives at the yoga studio and the text threads of the Parent-Teacher Association. By noon, my phone was buzzing with messages from women who had not spoken to me in years. Did you hear? Security escorted him out. They took his badge. I pieced the story together. Mark had swiped his keycard at the lobby turnstile, but the light turned red. A security guard. A man Mark probably ignored every single day for 5 years, had stepped forward. He told Mark that his access was suspended pending an internal investigation. Mark had made a scene. He had shouted about his rights. He had demanded to see the managing partner. Instead of the partner, 2 more guards appeared. They handed him a cardboard box containing his personal effects. They walked him out of the building in front of the lunch rush crowd. Mark Sullivan, the man who ate $40 sushi lunches to look successful, was now standing on the sidewalk holding a box of desk toys. Banned from the kingdom he thought he owned, I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. It was not joy. It was the feeling of a debt being paid. But the final blow, the one that truly shattered him, came later that afternoon. I was in the kitchen making grilled cheese sandwiches for the kids. Real cheese. Thick slices of cheddar that melted into gooey perfection. I was not rationing it. My phone rang. It was Mark. I had been advised by my lawyer not to answer. But curiosity is a powerful drug. I wanted to hear him. I wanted to hear the voice of the man who had called me pathetic. I put the phone on the counter and pressed the speaker button. What do you want? Mark? I asked, flipping a sandwich. You did this. He hissed. His voice was unrecognizable. It was jagged, broken, sounding like he had been screaming for hours. You sent that email. You got me suspended. They froze my deferred compensation. Blair, they are auditing my client accounts. I took a bite of a pickle. I crunched it loudly. You violated the morality clause in your contract. Mark, I just made sure they knew about it. I am going to fix this. He ranted. I am going to hire the best criminal defense team in the state. I am going to sue the department. I will sue you for defamation. I will bury you so deep you will never see sunlight. With what money? I asked calmly. You just said your compensation is frozen. I have money. He screamed. I have the fund. The money I saved. I said. The Agnes Emergency Fund. Yes, that is $45,000. Blair, that buys a lot of justice. I am going to Mom's house right now to get the cashier's check. And when I come back, I am coming for you. He hung up. I looked at the phone. I felt a flicker of nervousness. $45,000 was a lot of money. It could drag this divorce out for years. It could drain my parents' savings. But I knew something Mark did not. I knew Agnes. Agnes loved money. She loved the status it brought her. She loved the control. But more than anything, Agnes loved her own skin. She was a woman who cared deeply about appearances. She was the treasurer of the local historical society. She was a deacon at her church. Mark was now a pariah. He was a man accused of child neglect and fraud. He was toxic, and Agnes did not do toxic. 小于静好零 2 hash is greater than I waited. An hour later, my phone pinged. It was a voicemail from Mark. I played it. The sound that filled my kitchen was not human. It was the sound of a wounded animal caught in a trap of its own making. Mom, please, you cannot do this. It is my money. I transferred it to you. There was a pause, and then I heard Agnes's voice in the background. She sounded cold, distant, like she was speaking to a stranger. Mark, stop shouting. The neighbors will hear. I consulted with my accountant this morning. Dear, those transfers, you marked them as gifts to avoid the tax liability. Remember, you insisted. You said, Mom, this is a gift for your retirement. It was for the condo, for us. Mark screamed. The condo is in my name. Mark, the account is in my name. Legally, that money belongs to me. And frankly, with these legal troubles you are having, 小于静好零 2 hash is greater than with the police involved. 小于静好零 2 hash is greater than I cannot be seen funding a criminal defense. It would look terrible for the society. People talk. You are stealing from me, Mark sobbed. I am your son. I am protecting the family assets from being seized by the government. Agnes replied smoothly, if I give it back to you, they will just take it for legal fees or settlements. It is safer with me. Now, please leave. You are upsetting the cat. The voicemail ended with the sound of a door slamming and Mark screaming into the void. I stood in the silence of my parents' kitchen. The grilled cheese sandwiches were ready. Agnes had betrayed him. The woman he had conspired with, the woman he had chosen over his wife and children, had eaten him alive. He had set up the scheme to hide money from me, but in doing so, he had handed full legal ownership to a woman whose greed rivaled his own. He had gaslighted me for years, but his mother had just gaslighted him out of $45,000. He was broke. He was jobless, he was homeless, and he was alone. I put the sandwiches on plates. I cut them into triangles, just the way the kids liked. Come eat. I called out to the living room. Leo and Sophie ran in, their faces flushed with happiness. They climbed onto the stools. Look, Mommy, Leo said, holding up a drawing. It was a picture of a house. It had a yellow sun and green grass. But unlike the drawings he used to make, this one had smoke coming out of the chimney. It is warm inside, he explained. Yes, baby, I said, kissing his forehead. It is very warm. I sat down to eat with them. For the first time in forever, the food did not taste like ash. It tasted like victory. Mark was not coming for me. He had no teeth left. The Wolf of Wall Street had been declawed by his own mother. But I was not done. There was one more thing I had to do. I had to face him one last time. Not as his victim, but as the woman who survived him. I needed to look him in the eye when the judge brought down the gavel. I needed him to see that the pathetic housewife he mocked was the one who was left standing. The public fallout was complete. The private reckoning was next. The divorce proceedings were not the dramatic courtroom battle Mark had threatened. There were no shouting matches, no surprise witnesses bursting through the double doors. It was a quiet, clinical dissection of a marriage that had died long ago. The courtroom in Stamford was beige and smelled of floor wax. I sat on the left side, next to my lawyer, a woman named Sarah who worked for legal aid. She was young, overworked, and brilliant. On the other side sat Mark. He looked smaller. The expensive suits were gone, replaced by a generic blazer that hung loosely on his frame. He had lost weight. His hair, usually gelled to perfection, was dull and thinning. He was represented by a court-appointed attorney because he could not afford private counsel. Agnes had kept her word. She had not given him a dime. The judge, a stern man with gray hair, reviewed the evidence. The binder I had compiled, the photos of the empty fridge, the pay stubs, the recordings, sat on his bench like a black brick. Mark kept his head down. He did not look at me. The arrogance was gone, extinguished by the cold water of reality. He was living in a rented room in a rundown part of Bridgeport. He was working part-time doing data entry because no financial firm would touch him with a pending ethics investigation. He was living the poverty he had once forced me to pantomime. The irony was heavy in the air, thick enough to taste. "Mr. Sullivan," the judge said, peering over his glasses, "the evidence of financial abuse is overwhelming. You deliberately misled your wife about the family finances while causing significant hardship to your children. You withheld medical care. You withheld food. This is not just frugality. It is cruelty." Mark flinched. He mumbled something about saving for the future, but his voice lacked conviction. The judgment was swift. I was granted full physical custody of Leo and Sophie. Mark was granted supervised visitation every other Saturday at a court-approved center. He was ordered to pay child support based on his potential earning capacity, not his current minimum wage job. A legal maneuver Sarah had fought hard for. And then came the assets. Since Mark had successfully argued in his emails to Agnes that the $45,000 was a gift, the court could not touch it. It belonged to Agnes. Mark had outsmarted himself. By hiding the money so effectively from me, he had hidden it from himself. He walked away from the marriage with nothing but his debt and his shame. When the gavel banged, signaling the end, I expected to feel a surge of euphoria. I expected to want to dance. Instead, I felt a profound exhaustion. I walked out of the courthouse into the bright winter sunlight. The air was cold. Biting my cheeks, I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the free air. Mark came out a few minutes later. He stopped when he saw me. We stood on the steps, separated by 5 feet of concrete and a lifetime of pain. He looked at me. His eyes were red-rimmed. "Are you happy?" he asked. His voice was raspy. "You destroyed everything, Blair. My career, my relationship with my mother, my life." I looked at him. I looked at the man I had once thought was my savior, the man I had tiptoed around for years, the man whose mood determined the weather in my home. "I did not destroy you, Mark," I said softly. "I just turned on the lights. You are the one who built the house of cards." He sneered, a ghost of his old self trying to surface. "You will fail." He spat. "You do not know how to survive in the real world. You are weak. You will come crawling back when you run out of money." I smiled. It was a sad smile, but it was genuine. "I bought my own groceries yesterday, Mark. I bought the organic pasta, and I paid the electric bill with my own paycheck. I may be poor right now, but I am not hungry, and my children are not afraid of the sound of the garage door opening. That is not failure. That is freedom." I turned and walked away. I did not look back. I could hear him shouting something behind me, impotent threats floating away on the wind. but they did not matter anymore. He was just noise. The aftermath of a storm is always messy. The adrenaline fades, leaving behind the wreckage you have to clean up. I moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment near the library. It was not a colonial mansion in Westport. The carpets were thin, and the appliances were old, but it was ours. The first night in the apartment, I sat on the floor of the living room, surrounded by boxes. Leo and Sophie were asleep in their bunk beds. I had splurged on nightlights for them, tiny stars that projected onto the ceiling. I opened a bottle of wine, a cheap bottle, $10. I poured a glass and sat in the silence. The silence was different now. It was not the fearful silence of waiting for Mark to come home. It was a peaceful silence. It was a silence I controlled, but the scars were there. When I went to the grocery store, I still flinched at the price tags. When the heater kicked on, I still had a split second of panic about the bill. I caught myself hoarding food, hiding granola bars in my purse, just in case. Trauma does not vanish when the abuser leaves. It rewrites your neural pathways. It lives in your reflexes. I looked at my hands. They were rough from the library work, stained with ink. They were not the soft, manicured hands of a Westport housewife anymore. They were working hands, strong hands. I took out the Ruth's Chris receipt, the one I had saved as a talisman of my rage. I looked at it one last time. The lobster mac and cheese, the expensive wine. I took a lighter from the drawer. I held the flame to the corner of the thermal paper. It caught quickly, turning black and curling up. I dropped it into the sink and watched it burn to ash. I washed the ash down the drain. I was not Blair the victim anymore. I was not Blair the avenger. I was just Blair, and for the first time in my life, I did not know what came next, and that was okay. I finished my wine. I washed the glass. I checked the lock on the front door. Not because I was scared he would come in, but because it felt good to know I was the only one with the key. I went into the kids' room. I watched them sleep, their chests rising and falling in the soft light of the stars. Sophie's breathing was clear and steady. No wheezing. I lay down on the floor beside their bed, pulling a blanket over myself. I did not want to be alone in my room tonight. I wanted to be close to the only things that mattered. Tomorrow, I would have to figure out how to pay for Leo's field trip. I would have to deal with a leaky faucet. I would have to navigate single motherhood. But tonight, we were warm, we were fed, and we were free. It has been 6 months. The winter has returned to Connecticut, stripping the trees bare and turning the sky a relentless shade of steel gray. I am standing in my kitchen, the one with the laminate countertops and the faucet that drips a steady rhythm if I do not turn the handle just right. It is not perfect. It is miles away from the granite islands and stainless steel of my former life, but it is mine. I open the refrigerator. It is full. There is milk, juice, fresh vegetables, and a package of ground beef. There is no anxiety attached to these items. They are just things, objects to be consumed, not leverage to be used for control. Yesterday, I received a letter in the mail. It had no return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was jagged and rushed, lacking the precise, architectural slant Mark used to pride himself on. I sat at my small kitchen table and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of notebook paper. Mark wrote that he was living in a basement apartment in Bridgeport, a place with damp walls and bars on the windows. He wrote that the data entry job had laid him off. He wrote that his mother, Agnes, had stopped taking his calls after he threatened to sue her for the $45,000 she stole from him. He wrote that he had an interview for a junior analyst position next week, but his only suit, the charcoal one I used to dry clean, was moth-eaten and too tight. He asked for $200. He wrote, "I know you have a job now. Please, Blair, just a loan, for the sake of the father of your children. I will pay you back." I stared at the letter. $200. The exact amount I had begged him for when Sophie could not breathe. The exact amount that signaled the death of my marriage. The universe has a dark sense of humor, I admit. A part of me felt a tug of pity. It is the part of me that is still soft. The part that remembers the days when we were young and he promised to take care of me. That was my sin. Was it not? I have to be honest with myself now. In the quiet of this new life, I was not just a victim. I was a volunteer. I handed him the reins of my life years ago because I was too scared to drive. I let him take control because I did not want the responsibility of the bills, the taxes, the hard decisions. I traded my autonomy for a false sense of security. I let myself be small so he could feel big. I am guilty of that, and I am paying for it. I work long hours at the library. My back aches. I worry about the future every single day. Freedom is exhausting. But then I remembered the sound of him laughing when I told him the kids were hungry. I remembered the taste of the instant noodles while he ate steak. I remembered the cold contempt in his eyes when he called me a liability. I walked to the pantry. I reached to the very back of the shelf, past the boxes of real pasta and jars of organic sauce. I pulled out a packet of generic instant noodles, chicken flavor, the kind that costs 19 cents. I took an envelope. I folded the noodle packet flat. I put it inside the envelope, along with a small note on library stationery. I picked up my pen and wrote, "You have to make sacrifices to get ahead. Mark, eat this. It will motivate you. It is the principle of the thing." I sealed the envelope. I put a stamp on it. I did not send the money. I sent him the taste of his own medicine. It was cruel. I know it was cruel. Perhaps I have become harder than I intended, but I have learned that sometimes mercy is just permission for a wolf to bite you again. I walked to the mailbox at the end of the road. I dropped the letter inside. As the metal flap clanged shut, I felt the last tether to him snap. He was no longer a monster under my bed. He was just a hungry man who had forgotten that you reap what you sow. I walked back to my apartment. I could see Leo and Sophie in the window, sticking paper snowflakes to the glass. They were laughing. They were warm. Agnes is alone in her big house with her stolen money and her cold heart. Mark is alone in his basement with his pride and my packet of noodles. I opened the door and walked into the noise and the mess and the warmth of my life. I picked up Sophie and spun her around until she giggled. We are not rich. We never will be. But tonight, we are having steak for dinner, and we are going to eat every single bite.